This is 6.4 Review and Feedback. Here we have 5 graphs comparing 2 players' results from a basketball match. The results in the green as shown above are Ewan's results, and the results in red are James's results. In figure 1, we can see that Ewan scored over double the amount of 2-pointers and missed less 2-pointers than James. In figure 4 we can also see the same outcome for 3-pointers, where Ewan scores more 3-pointers and misses less than James. This shows us that Ewan had a better scoring rate in 2 and 3-pointers in the game than James. In figure 3 it's the same outcome, but this time they missed the same amount of layups. This shows us that Ewan was better at layups but also had more shots than him. We can also see in figure 2 that Ewan performed more successful steals than James is. The same goes for figure 5, where we can see that Ewan was more successful with defensive rebounds. This data shows us that Ewan overall had a better game than James and performed better at my 5 performance criteria that I chose. Here we have 2 schematics of 2 different people's distance covered in our basketball match that we played. A schematic is a visual image of the distance covered and the movement of a player on a pitch in a game. The schematic on the left, which is Ewan's, the distance covering this was 1,900 metres, and the one on the right is James's, and he covered 2,300 metres. So here we can see that James's, the one on the right, covered more distance than Ewan's. The difference between the two is that James's covered the whole pitch roughly for the same amount on both sides, but on Ewan's we can see that he mostly covered one half of the pitch, which was his attacking half. This is because he would have been more of an attacking player of their team and not done as much defending as others. Therefore, Ewan did not cover as much distance as the others. This could have been bad for Ewan's team, as when the opposition were attacking, his team would have been outnumbered, as Ewan wouldn't have been getting back as much, so they would have had a player over them when they were attacking, and it would have been easier for them to score. We have 2 comparisons from the data we collected from our basketball match. Our first comparison is to see whether someone's height can make a difference in the amount of defensive rebounds that they achieve. We can see from this graph that there is no correlation between the two. This tells us that the height of a player doesn't affect the amount of defensive rebounds. However, we can see from this graph that there were more defensive rebounds from the player that was taller. So there we can say that the height does affect it a bit, but doesn't completely affect it, as the smaller players were also able to get more defensive rebounds than players that are taller than them. Despite this data only tells us how many defensive rebounds were successful, as it doesn't tell us how many they attempted. This means that there still could be a chance that the height does matter, but this graph just doesn't represent it. The second graph on the right that we have here is defensive rebounds versus offensive rebounds. A defensive rebound is when getting the basketball after the opposition have had a shot and missed and hit the backboard or the rim, and you are the first player to get the ball without it going out of play or to an opposition. An offensive rebound is doing the same, but when doing it when your team shoots and miss at the opposition's hoop. From this data we can see that there was more defensive rebounds than offensive rebounds. This shows us that the teams probably would have tried more when defending than attacking. We also can't tell what team got more rebounds, as it could be that one team got more defensive rebounds as they were defending more than attacking. This is my comparison of a performer to a technical model. Here we have 4 key techniques for each of our preparation phase, execution phase and recovery phase of a box out in basketball. We can then see in our coaching points column that Ewan succeeded, which is in the green, and what he didn't execute right, which is in the red. We can see here in the preparation phase, Ewan unsuccessfully kept his eyes on the player as well as the ball. This would have been because he was more focused on where the ball was going after the shot took place, as this is what he was wanting to gain possession of. We can also see that he successfully succeeded in all of the key points in the execution phase. Despite this, in the recovery phase, he did not keep the ball close to him after gaining possession of the ball. This could have allowed the opposition to steal the ball off him. He also didn't keep his pivoting position, which could have allowed the opposition player to steal the ball from him as well. This is data from 6 people doing a 20-meter sprint 3 different times. The data is recorded so you can see how fast everyone went every 5 meters on each sprint. The main thing that we can see from this is that everyone's first 5 meters was their slowest in each sprint. This would have been because they were going from station to accelerating, and they wouldn't have had as much momentum as they would have done for the other 5-meter sprints. In the sprints, not many of the participants' last 5 meters, they managed to get slower than their previous 5 meters. This could have been because they were slowing down as they were running to the end and didn't have enough motivation to finish the sprint. We can see here that Ewan's start in his first sprint was his quickest of the 3, and that in all 3 of the races he gradually got quicker most of the time. This is good as it shows that he didn't get tired, but also we can see from his slow starts he had bad explosive power. Ewan had strengths and weaknesses from his sprints that we have spotted. Some of his strengths were his final sprint was his quickest, as this could have been because he was warmed up the most. His acceleration as the race went on got better and better, which showed that his stamina levels were good. For each final 15 meters, each 5 meters were normally around the same speed, which shows that each race he was running the same speed and putting in as much effort. And he was also going at a good constant speed throughout the whole races and not letting it drop. Ewan's improvement would have been that he decelerated in his final sprint, and this could have been because he was either getting tired as he'd done the sprint 3 times, or he was getting tedium from doing it so many times and didn't have as much motivation in the final sprint. You can also see that his first sprint was his slowest. This could have been because he wasn't as warmed up as he was for the other sprints. For this, Ewan would need to work on acceleration at the start of the race, so he would have to do a plyometric training program to do this. This will help him have a quick, short, explosive start at the start of the race. They might just have bad reaction times to the whistle or gun at the start of the race, which could affect this. If this was the case, then that he would have to practice their sprints at the start of every training session. To measure Ewan's success in this, we would have to record the first 10 meters of his sprint each month or so after doing the program to see if he was getting improvements or not. Here are Ewan's strengths and weaknesses that I noticed from his results. In notational analysis, his strength was his scoring to missing rate of 3-point shots, as he successfully made 3 out of 4 shots. Despite this, we noticed that from the schematics that he was in the attacking half a lot more than he was in the defending half. This would have meant that his team would have been outnumbered by the opposition when they were attacking, and it would have been easier for them to score. In the technical model, Ewan was successful at keeping the pivot and his position when boxing out in basketball. This was good as it stopped the opposition player from being able to get to the ball. However, Ewan did not keep his eyes on the player, which could have made him lose his man and allow the player an easy access to the ball. In the numerical model, Ewan's first strength from this was that he accelerated throughout the whole of the race. This showed that he didn't at any point get tired, as this happened to everyone else during the race apart from him. Despite this, I noticed that acceleration at the start of the race was poor and let him down for his whole sprint, as it was a lot slower than his other parts of the sprint. This would have been because he was starting in a static position, but it also was because of his poor explosive power. Ewan's weakness for notational analysis was that he covered more distance in the attacking half than the defending half. This would have been because he would have been a more attacking-minded player, but mainly because his endurance levels were low, which meant after sprinting to attack he wasn't able to get back and defend after, as he had fatigued from attacking. This then meant that he stayed in the attacking half more, and when his team got the ball he would then attack with them as he was already in the attacking half. A way of improving this is to do training on his cardiovascular endurance. For this I would make Ewan do shuttle sprints. This is where he would start on one end of the court and have to run to the edge of the D and then back and then to the halfway line and back and then end up running the whole court and back. He would have to do this 3 times in a row without stopping. I would time him every time he does this to measure his improvements so that we know that he is improving and that is working for him. Ewan's second weakness was when performing the pivot at the start. He was only focused on the ball when being shot and not the player. This can mean that he loses his player and isn't able to perform the pivot, and the opposition player would have an easy way to the ball. Ewan would need to learn to position his body so that he was able to see the ball and the player. A bit of this will have to be anticipating where the shot goes as well. We would improve this by practicing and training and demonstrating to him what he should do with his body position. We would start off by doing this without the ball, so Ewan wasn't more focused on the outcome than the technique involved. We would then progress it with a ball so it was more game realistic. We would do this once a week for 4 weeks. We would then at the end of the 4 weeks do a game where we would keep Ewan as a more defensive player so that we could focus on his defensive rebounds. Ewan's last weakness was slow acceleration at the start of his sprints. This is from having bad explosive power, which is letting down his start of the race. We see that Ewan's acceleration is poor from the data. We see that once he has accelerated, he is one of the fastest, but his start is one of the slowest. To improve this, we will do plyometric training. This will involve box jumps. In this, I will get Ewan to perform box jumps with a routine. The routine would be 3 times a week with 3 sets of 10 reps. We would start off by finding out what Ewan's highest he can jump to on a box jump is, and then every week we would try to up it by 10 centimeters to see if there was any improvement in his jumps. During this, I would also get him to perform squat jumps with the same routine to improve this. We would then time his first 10 meters of a sprint after every 2 weeks of doing this routine to see if his acceleration was improving. Finally, we have the feedbacks on how you would give feedback to certain people. One element to how it would affect how you gave feedback to someone would be someone's age. For example, a younger person you wouldn't shout at and scream at if they did something wrong, and you would go about doing things in a different way to improve them. Another element is ability. If someone's ability was better than another person's, you would dig into them more if they did something worse because they've got high standards, whereas if someone with not very good ability or very confident, you wouldn't tell them how badly they did things, as it would get them down. You also have to be honest with the people, and if they've done something bad, you need to tell them so that they know that they've done it bad. But with this comes along with telling them something good. So if you were going to tell them 2 negatives, you would put in a positive in the middle to make it not all sound bad so it didn't knock their confidence. This is especially for someone with a lower ability and not very confident, as you don't want to knock their confidence. There are 2 different ways on giving someone feedback. One way being non-verbal communication and the other being verbal communication. Both of these can help different people. in different ways, as it can improve them better and show them demonstrations in non-verbal communication, but verbal can help verbal learners.